of individuals are things that emphasize fairness and compassion in social relations. And so these are the things that stand and can look at policy as a form of a rounding of policy implications and recommendations in order to combat insurgency effectively and efficiently. National security policies are advised to incorporate Islamic ethical principles such as adl, justice, amana, trust, and musla, public interest, which is very, very important. Anything that will not form is not the interest, will be of interest to the public is not Islamic. Faith-based approaches in social economic planning like structured zakat and sadaqah. And these things are not utopia. We see that the federal government is looking at sukuk as a way of, sukuk is an Islamic thing. And because it's beneficial to the federal government, I'd like to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. I don't know whether in the process, Matthew, Abu, worked in. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3. So I think I'm going to go. The last presenter for the group, good morning, and I would like to welcome us to LSA 2025. The title of my paper is 40 Lines and 40 Identities. It's going back to Berlin, the path to real identities and sovereignty in Africa. At the recent conference like this, I think it was in the University of Lagos, so at the recent conference, I had the opportunity of interacting with the director of the the main institute on the island that was in charge of international relations in Africa. And I asked him the question. So at the exit of the colonialists, why didn't the African leaders we have there, why didn't they think of reverting back to our original identities? Perhaps since we already agree that there are uninteresting legacies that were bestowed on us by colonialists, why didn't they have thoughts of reverting back to original identities? Perhaps from there we could have a discussion about talking about development. And he smiled and said, well, one of the reasons, his belief, the main reason was because, in before the advent of the colonialists, a lot of African societies were involved in intertribal wars, interclan wars, and wars between different nationalities, as can be quoted in contemporary times. So I asked the question, can you point to any part of the world where the peoples in relations in neighborhoods never had crises? There are, if you go to Europe, we've read the history of the 20-year war, 30-year war, several wars. The Americas, there are wars between the settlers and the original indigenous, the Indians that were there, in any part of the world. So why should that of Africa now be different? Of course, there will always be war. He smiled and said, well, there were better reasons for that. And that was why I asked the question, because undoubtedly, contemporary states in Africa are no doubt built along 40 lines. They are built along 40 lines, and these 40 lines are colonial legacies. And these legacies are one of the primary causes of conflict, violence within African states. Of course, the first presenter here talked about the civil war in Nigeria that happened between 1967 and 70. And there were ethnic undertones in this civil war. If we talk about the genocide in Rwanda, if we talk about Kenya, if we talk about several parts of Africa, questions of identities have always been at the base of violence that sometimes lead to crisis. So, and another problem is that one main thing is that individuals and groups, they seem more aligned to others who share similar identities rather than without the consent, without the participation, without the involvement or the interest of the people that they were drawing the lines on. And today, till date, today, the president of Nigeria is visiting Benue State today to try and mourn with them, to try and condole with them, to try and, but at the root, interestingly, I lived in Benue for another 5 years. I mean, another main problem is that there is the Africa is at its lowest ebb. There we have developed challenges of underdevelopment, poverty, maternal morbidity, and several incidents. And then we have epistemic side, loss of culture, loss of languages, loss of history, loss of identity, and total loss of being. And we are still trying to find food to understand ourselves before talking about how we can now talk about development, things that will bring about the basic flourishing of human life. It is very difficult, and history has shown that it is difficult for you to take away questions of religion, questions of identity, questions of culture, questions of ethnicity from development. And like they say, there's no part of the world, perhaps I would get that information today, if there's any part of the world that have developed based on another person's language. At the end of the Second European War, that's the World War, the Japanese were able to quickly gather themselves together because they had a single culture, a single focus, a single language, a single identity, and were able to quickly sort themselves out and get themselves back on the path of development. But African countries, after several years of quote unquote decolonization, or so to say, we have really found it difficult to be able to get our footings right and be able to come up with authentic things that will bring about our development, things that will bring about first our integration. For us to still be talking about the question of integration in a country like Nigeria after 50 years of development, then there are some fundamental issues. So that's why I asked the question, and that's why this paper on its own is interrogating the question of why can't we go back to Berlin and redraw our identity, redraw our lines, redraw our states? Or is there any person or group of persons or institutions? Because several attempts by African Union, initially Organization of African Unity, African Union, United States, ECOWAS, at bringing about development within regional or the continent have till date not really shown that fruit. So is there anybody who is afraid of Yoruba land as a country? Is there anybody who is afraid of Igbo land as a country? Are there groups of people who are afraid of Hausa land as a country? These are the questions that I interrogated by the paper, and I would enjoy further interrogation on this panel. I thank you for taking your time to listen. And so, based on that, being the one managing the panel, then we'll take the last paper, War and Violence in Nigeria.
Good morning once again. I'm here to present on behalf of my colleague who is not here. So I will take the abstract of his paper which he sent to me. The title of his paper is War on Nature, a catastrophe of man's inhumanity.
War and Violence in
Yeah,
Nigeria.
it was modified.
Okay, modified.
Man's preoccupation with territorial aggression is well documented in history. Nature has been the point of disputes since life on Earth, verse 4. War demonstrates man's intrinsic propensity to rule nature from ancient times. This determination to maintain the continuities of a stable ecosystem influences efforts against deforestation, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Environmental exploitation by states and non-state actors is the lifeblood of international conflicts and terrorism. The exploitation of natural resources continue to make conflict more severe, last longer, and more difficult to resolve. This is indicative of most conflicts around the globe. The research proposes to explore the nexus between war, peace, and environmental devastation. The study suggests that the UN Sustainable Development Goals be modified to amplify the imminent catastrophe of the extinction of life on planet Earth if the impact of war on nature are not mitigated. In this circumstance,
Okay, thank you for that presentation. I think now we have good time on our hands to interact with the papers that were presented here. So I think we take numbers for, so if you are interested in making comments on any of the papers or asking questions, please let's say by raising our hands so that we number. Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7. Thank you. Okay, please. You tell us which of the papers you are talking about. Okay, okay, let's. Okay, then sorry, we don't know if there are more people online who would be interested in also interacting with any of the papers. Do we have any indication online? No, no one. Okay, so. Okay, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you to join us. My name is Kyle. I will listen to my questions after each presenter.
Yes, please.
Thank you. My first question will go to John Toby for the presentation of the Civil War era and the situation process. Actually, I will repeat about the time, that's 1917 to 1953. So I want to see empirical evidence to show that it was within the spite of the poor, immediately the church, took the north. I mean, in spite of the poor, in spite of the mass killings, it's needed to return to the north. And of course, in 1983 stoppage of the paper was exactly was its back. How does it really in this situation? Okay. Then the second question I would like to put it on to lecture Dr. Mr. Usman Animation. So, because of your presentation, to lead that socioeconomic questions and poverty were basically responsible for families. And so there's about that. And in a way, we are taking away influence of the cartel who actually benefit from the government. Because it's understood that some of the people who are engaging the violence, especially in Nigeria, some of those who are in the violence, the majority of them are foreign, I mean, look at the fact that they are used as tools to get some people gains. In the end, after had the largest from violence, be it from banditry or from kidnapping, after all they are rich. Millions of people outcome after being rich, still black. And those who are even involved in this banditry and violence, if you look at them, maybe after some of them are arrested, even poorer than some of those who are not even involved in the banditry. And look at the influence of some cartels of unseen evil hands who are actually using them for political case. Then the second question also goes to, it is about the what we regard as the major thrust of the world, in that Islam does not support violence. Well, I would like to put it light on that because the empirical evidence before some of us who look at the nature and dimension of violence by run contrary to what your position is. Perhaps we might let us understand that some sects in Islam are attuned to violence. If you take the larger Islamic group, we talk about the Sunni, we talk about the Shia, perhaps we talk about the Wahhabiyya, and also we are talking about Salafis in particular. You are also an attendant of the Sunni, our Sunni, because several times we see the way Shia actually promotes Sunni religion, Sunni sect, and Salafism. So, what do you say about Salafism in particular? That's quite interested in violence, and then also the past of Islam. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's take all the contributions so that the general.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we should be candidates. My name is Lukulu Akshala. I'm a PhD student at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies University. I find the papers very interesting. The first question, or maybe a contribution now, to is it Dr. Mr. John? Dr. Ube. The question I want to ask, you mentioned that during the time when the Igbos came back to Zaria, they were received because of probably some laws that were implemented by the head of state at that time. I think that's like the summary of it. It made it easier for the Igbos to come. That aside the labels that were welcome, that's the general idea. And now this reminds me of, because I'm looking at what is happening today and what changed. So it reminds me of Malcolm X autobiography when he talked about his philosophy of integration. He never supported integration when he was before he went to Mecca and came back. Then real thing changed. And till now, the blacks are still finding it hard to integrate in America. And that's why they are still having the racist problem today, Black Lives Matter. So, don't you think, I'm just asking, maybe if you are expanding, I think from this question to that, what happened afterwards? What's happening now? Should they have integrated? And maybe tying it to Dr. Sharabi's paper, maybe they should have gone back to their land or their territory with the same language, where they have the same affinity and all of that. Should they have integrated? That's my question. And second question to each of you. Do you think that it was political? I mean, you said the head of states then made it easier for them to integrate. Do you think it was political? I believe it was more of socio-economic reasons. That's what I believe. I did not think it's political. And I think we generally need to move away from always putting reasons to be political. And like Dr. Sharami said, I don't agree with Dr. Sharami, or language identity. We need to move from that. Start to think about social economic reasons instead. I mean, when your neighbor that is not the owner of the land is doing better than you start to feel like they're about to take your land from you. So could it be social-political, sorry, socio-economic reasons other than political and religion or religions as Islam? Sadly, it's very much up. If not because he had, the first person asked that question, he mentioned how the poverty and other things are reasons for insurgency. Because I struggled to, because when I looked at the topic, so you're trying to say that when people are poor, they are aggrieved, and because of that, they tend to go into violence. So are we saying that that's trying to get remember? Are we trying to say that it's only peculiar to Islam? That's my question. I'm saying it's only peculiar to Islam that when Islamic people are poor, so they are aggrieved and so they have to resort to violence. What of other religions that are poor? Are they also aggrieved? Or are they also not aggrieved? Have they gone into, to get what I'm trying to say? But we're saying this is the reason for that. It's not universal, that it's peculiar to a particular religion. That's my contribution to the question. Then Dr. Sharami, I think I've said it when I was talking to, I know as a political philosophy student too, that identity language will always be at the top of what we call it now, territorial affinity, put it that way. But we need to start to think about social economic reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I just mentioned this to you. You said some things about the said some meeting the vote 1983. Does that mean it's not the reintegration exercises in 1984? Then what is the significance to contemporary time? What message do you want us to take from it? By first of all looking at the supposition of what happened after that and what is happening after. The essence of this is how to be related to the present situation, because we know there are significances that region and things are seriously being put. So my question is that what is the situation of things now? So what is the significance of this situation at that time and several evidences that we put forward? So my question also goes to Dr. Marshall. Okay, Mr. Marshall. Okay. You talked about poverty and as one of the efforts to Islamic perspective to try to take the dimension of insurgency in this region, poverty and employment. I mean, addressing the issue of poverty and employment. But not first of all helping us to situate the connection between poverty and unemployment grievances. Again, because there are quite a lot of things that would make somebody to their things. So there must be a way of trying to make by first of all putting out other possibilities, which I don't think will be reality for us to do, considering the fact that the insurgency is multidimensional, the causes are obviously multidimensional. By now limiting the solutions to this area means that we should forget other causes of this grievance. There's a need for you to incorporate several dimensions of this grievances that we know and evidence. So issues of religion from what we are saying is, to me, one of these. That is true, because what is political is not evidence. What is political is this issue is not evidence. So there is need for you to identify these other issues so that we will not assume that issues of religion, because when you are pictured as like looking at this from a Islamic perspective, you are already bringing us to be giving us the understanding of putting us to that position to believe that it is issues of religion, like it's most evidence. So there is a need for you to demystify this and make us understand the motivational background of the nature of the insurgency.
Sorry, man, your name is.
My name is Dr.
Yes, let's go.
All right, thank you. My name is Wuraba from Greece, out of Bakar University. And my first question goes to you, sir. Sorry, we need to have many questions to answer. Because I think your topic is a very topical issue, and one that provokes emotions. And then I would like to ask, what do you think defined as the ethical dimensions for a state within a state that has its own soldiers, that has its own forces that implement laws like the Sharia state we have in the north, with Islam and all of those going around to compare the obedience. And then recently I heard that a particular lady who decided to become a Christian is being prosecuted in one of those courts. Meanwhile, the Nigerian law permits that anybody could be any religion they want to be. So, what is the ethical dimension for the fact that we have a state within a state with its own system of operations? And then because that may bring an issue where there could be frictions between the Constitution of Nigeria and then between that law. And then again, like this my brother presented on, should we go back to the name? Useful presentation, just a little comment to make. And that comment is that we were not the only country that were colonized. There were several other countries that have been colonized. An example is India, by the fact with the higher population. And so I think it is that time when African countries will need to come together and then exercise a political will to exercise and rethink and exercise their manifest destiny. So just like the book would say, I'm of the opinion too that Africa is not really pursuing its destiny at the moment. We are pursuing the destiny of other European or powerful nations who wants to get for their own national interest. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes. There after you.
My name is Ngozi Kaopiaki from History Department, University. My question, I want to make a little comment of people asking about your periodization. As a historian, he has his own reasons for something that this particular research at this 1983. So if there's anything contemporary, we need to add that according to the conclusion, and also make openings for people to carry out further research in what they again this year. And thank you for that participation. Even though I still want to, it's true that she mentioned about their people they should have gone back to their home. But you know, these people they live there, so they are born there. They speak Igbo more outside than the Igbo language, and because of our own idea of ethnicity, they have property there, and they are not during that war. Some of them have not been to the Igbo land, some came for the first time. Some we are not even accommodated because they will not be seen.
it again. And then at the end of the war, we think that Igbo land was devastated, bombed, many things happened. So, and at the end of the day, we were giving less than 20 pounds for survival. So they had no alternative than going back to where they be, where they have business, despite how Nigeria not been. So I going back, that is the only place they know. For that, I would have also want to know more about these processes of brain integration in Zaria. Being that, I knew that during the program, a lot of things happened. There was skill waivers. So apart from them coming back, it's not only in Kaduna that it happened, it happened in other parts of the states. So I've been able to interrogate how the people were able to overcome the trauma, because when you read about Rwandan genocide, you find out that it's true that they were making room for this kind of integration and forgiveness. But people that have been interviewed over the years will tell you that you know that this is the person that killed your father and your boss. So it was difficult actually in integrating and reconciling when you know that the cause of your trauma is your neighbor. So I want you to please, if you can look at that aspect about that's it for you. Then we know we are getting conversation with that. Then I didn't get to him. I'm so sorry. Yeah, when I saw I thank you for opening the panel because I'm looking on welcome to students. I'm thanking you for the panel. Then when I saw the belly going back to the I said, you said that going back to the it's like there is privacy going on now. So one professor from the one that you are part of, that's about from Companies West Africa, there's another group we are part of the education. And the professor projected that Africa should go back to the league. And most of us who we are part of that conversation in that space, parents something going back to the league. I couldn't understand. And when you are talking about Berlin, as a historian, I'm looking at what's happening in Berlin, how Africans were divided in Berlin. And then I'm just supposing it when Nigeria was brought together in 1940. Because at that Berlin, if I'm understanding correctly, I knew that they decided to divide organized Africans, not minding the ethnic affiliation, dividing to different places. So bringing Nigeria, if we should go back to Berlin, for what? I don't understand why we are going back to Berlin. Now we are looking at the recent latest scholarship is not only about indigenous knowledge. We are thinking about decolonization. So why are we going back to Berlin to solve our problems? So that is where I'm having issues with your favor, the idea, because this is the debate we have with the professor from Kenya who felt that the only solution to Congo problem is going back to Berlin to do what? Which means, according to the whites in South Africa, they claim that Africa should not have power because they don't have the natural way to rule. Are you also in support that we cannot organize ourselves, we cannot get it right? These are the questions I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm Dominic James from Ahmadu University. I have two comments for the two presenters, not of the ones I have presented, but I will follow as a line to the last Abai mistake that my sister here just finished with. You made mention in your presentation about the exit of the colonials, and we begin to still really exist, or they really exited, because we still have the colonial indicators all over our governments. And you talked about fault lines that were created by the colonials. And I wanted to also observe that before they came, we also have our individual fault lines, and those are things that we should look at. Now, talking about the title, going back to Berlin. First of all, we have to call it by its rightful name. The Berlin Conference, as they call it, is the scramble for Africa. So, yes, so should we go back to scramble upon, or should we go back to the repartition? These are things we have to really ask ourselves, and we have to interrogate the idea that when we come to African governance, like in Nigeria, if you want to start an election, you go to Chatham House in London, you go and give your manifesto and all that. These are African problems for African people and need African credible solutions. So why should we go back to the people that created it in the first place with their own interest in mind? You know, it is not our interest. So these are things we have to really interrogate before talking about going back to Berlin, which is not necessary. Then you talked about that Berlin conference has created our identity problems and all that. Not in all cases, because like in Nigeria, we have the indirect route. We did not become black Frenchmen. We are allowed to keep some of our religions, some of our ethnicity, some of our languages, and all that. So whatever must have happened after that, we have to look inwards, not pointing at colonialism. This is something that we have to look inwards. It's not all of the identity problems or fault lines that comes to identity that are created by the West, so to speak. Then we talked about, okay, talking about identities and all that. For instance, during the Civil War, I'll be coming down to the Civil War issue. We have seen the problems that while the people in the East went down, that does not mean within the East there were no divisions. There were little grievances within even the army in the East, just like you have also grievances within the army in the North. So we have to accommodate the fact that years after, if you look at the Biafra map now, if you are to draw the Biafra map, you see that many people have stepped out from being under that first umbrella. It's to tell you that even within, there are fault lines that have to be looked at. You brought a very good example about the Japanese, that after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bomb and all that, 1945, they went and they organized. Let's not forget that the Japanese, as small as it is, were colonizing China for a very long time. Not the new China we're looking at now as an emerging Cold War power. The Japanese colonized China for a long time, and we have to look at the unity when it comes to they speaking their countries, they being Buddhists and Taoists, and they also being Shintoists rather, and their sense of religion is totally different from what we have here in Nigeria with the plenty people. Now, going back to Berlin and the idea of cartography itself, breaking down into maps and all, let us understand it's a Western. So to break down people based on physical appearance, based on their geography, based on what they are eating and all, it's really not an African thing. And I don't think it's something that we should go back to. We should rather look for viable solutions within our even philosophies, whether it's Bantu philosophy, whether it's the philosophy of the cyclical idea of whatever you happen to do to the living, the dead are also bearing witness so that the unborn can come and correct it and all that. So in a nutshell, looking at the argument concerning going back to Berlin, I think we have to look at it in a post-colonial term. We have to interrogate why in the first place and what it is, how we can contemplate decolonization of the colonizing perspective. Lastly, my comment is on the post-Nigerian Civil War Igbo reintegration. I have to say I love the presentation and I have some observations. The British are not the only people. Before the British came, we already have a system that segregates. It is not the coming of colonization that we started segregation in our societies. In the north, for instance, there's the our houses, that's the house of the peasants, the poor people. There's the royal houses. And in the royal houses, they are different from those of the peasants. So there's even a divide in the division of what? Settlement, where those that have the blue-blooded aristocracy have a settlement, and the others, the peasants, the workers, have their own settlement. And when you talk about Sabongari is not really for the people. No, Sabongari is for any newcomer that comes from any direction. This is before you be imposed, integrated, or appropriated into the society. It's a security measure to say there's a new stranger, there's a new person, we have to know him and want to know his mission. So Sabongari, as the word, if we look at the translation, is new city, right? Now, we have Zango too. Zango is a settlement where you collect these people down on top. Okay, let me be rounded. You were speaking about the North as though it's a monolithic society. It's not. And when you talk about Hausa is not even a true Hausa state. It's among the bastard Hausa states. Zaria, for instance. It's not even. Zaria is not a Hausa, but it is the formation.
Yeah, it is.
So now, what I want you to understand is in Zaria, which is under Kaduna State, for instance, there are 66 tribes or more than. But you speak as though it's not the outside people that are there, which is not. And when you come to talk about the division, when you come to talk about the people that left during the war and all that, not all of them left. Some people still remain. Like my sister projected. Some never knew home. It was east, so they stayed behind. And there are also Igbos that fought in the Nigerian army. Not all. Like if you have to go and look at why we struck again earlier, you have to look at say look at now. You have to these are autobiographies and look at the one Sanjo. You see people giving confessions to soldiers who are supposed to fight on the other side, but on the federal side. I think that should be accommodated. And my brother here made mention of the epistemics of your research. It sounded more like an advocacy, rather than we did not see the epistemological proofs and argument giving us evidence for some of these claims. And I support the idea that most of the arguments is socio-economic, because even when they were told to come, somebody that loses 20-story building is giving a flat rate of money to come back. And if, for instance, you use 10 million to build a house, and they said there's a flat rate for 10,000 for everybody who is going to come back, it was the flat rate. There was a flat rate amount that was put across all those that are coming that have not come. And some of them, that flat rate did not accommodate the loss. So it did not really sit well with some of them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Please, we have more questions so that at least we'll give the presenters some time to respond to the questions. So we have 1, 2. So please let's be fast and direct with the questions so that the presenters will have the panelists will have time to respond.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Swaju from the University of Jos. I actually had questions for you about the university. My question is lying with one of these parts of the audience. So I want to comment on Mr. Osman's presentation. Coming from the northern part of the country that has so far from some of these violence, crisis, information about this kind of if you try to find out why people that perpetrate these mask themselves as Muslims, because I have had this notion that Muslims and Islam and violence and wars. But just at the time when these issues come to find that the public are often associated with Islam. Now, the second thing I want to talk about access. Looking at the agreement system education. Is it a regional problem that is happening to other parts of the country? Because the first acknowledge these things started in the northern part, but then we are having focus in most parts of the southern part of the country. Now, lastly, I want to know if there is any effort on the part of Islamic leaders in Nigeria to radicalize some of the people that are involved in this of some of the community philosophies that some of these people have.
I don't get the second question. Second
Is it a regional problem that is not really across the country?
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Moses Saudi, and I'm from the National Communication at the West. Five presentations I will say. Friend also, I was just thinking, why people say that what intervention to paper okay, so what intervention? What like she said, how important are the regional discourse? If you present something back, for example, in Q&A, what will be the reception? Such and use such again in so can we with time what some of the information of in this week you have a theory that will change your discussion so that will give us understanding of the team. What is it that what tools was your analysis that we should find it? You know, it give us a specific direction now. And then the second part from previous to violence. You know, we are from the north. And when we hear some of these discussions about religion, sometimes we don't even talk about it. All right? But it's about all right, so we will talk. Now, the previous now. Who is that? And then is it self-inflicted? Is it weaponized? Is Islam, for example, used? It is not in itself. Is it used to weaponize the grievance? All right. So the third paper is a reflection of this question, all right, that we have been asking, because we have now the difference between Islam and any dimension have convoluted issues. For example, early marriage and the poverty, we have the marriage system that is poverty, and the marriages are the ones that have become damaged. The data are there. Unless it's so easy. And then two have led this country the most. All right. So this is you see the first one is continuity. Okay, so it is an analysis, for example, deliver. We should make it a way that we should be the target audience, and I try to say that the passion that we have assistant. Thank you, sir. The last speaker, I'm asking how much of Africa can we find in Berlin? And then what is it used to background you to opinion? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very few remarks. Thank you for your presentation. The comment from the other general colleagues again who presented very well. So I go very quickly to the paper on the post-Nigerian Civil War. By the way, I'm Dr. Friday of the Department of East Transformation Studies here at Faculty of Arts. So first is that this work that is on the reintegration among other things. In order to make it to be too just a general statement of this reintegration process, which sometimes may be questionable, because as pointed out by the previous colleagues here, the essence of reintegration are proclaimed by the government at that time, but to see how we have common unity. So to ensure that there was a different arrangement that was so successful in Kaduna, you have other parameters. I'm speaking to you now. Other parameters within the area. The Igbos are leaving because of the war. When they return, how were they integrated in those other Hausa or in the northern state, such that this one is now receiving this kind of serious attention? It is only when you do that, because this stuff is quite old, that you will have a major gap in the existing literature that you will feel that make it actually so. So I'm suggesting that joint variables are, oh, in Kano, this is what took place. In Zamfara, this is what took place. And when you compare this wants it to be unique by this specific action that were taken by the government of the day, because the issue of reintegration, rehabilitation, among other, was the federal government proclamation. How was it domesticated here that make it to be so unique that receive our attention? In that way, we pay the way for that. On the issue of grievance among others, we have to be very careful here, given the fact that there are even countries that are poorer than Nigeria. They are not into insurgency. So to anchor it that a result of people are very poor. What happened to those people in Liberia? They are poorer than those in the north. Why is there no insurgency there? What you had there was a civil war, but not insurgency. So let's look at the very reason, so that it's a combination of factors. And you also try to ask yourself, how come the issues of states that are Muslim states, that where they have huge insurgency all over the world, even in Africa in particular? Just check any country in Africa that there is insurgency, and majority of people in those countries, they are Muslim. So how will we be able to differentiate the fact that there is a high dichotomy between the religion itself and violence? Not making reference to certain place in the Quran, which are we misinterpret. Don't look at it that, oh, in Northwest, this is what happened. In the North Central, this. If you go to West Africa, go to Central Africa, go to East Africa, among others, where you have the intensity of insurgency are usually Muslim. So how do you explain that kind of dynamics, except not to narrow it into monoposal approach, like the issue of poverty? Then going back to Berlin, what I would like here in the case of Berlin, because of the title, because sometimes when you give a very catchy title, aesthetics writing, people are eager to read. But they embrace fundamental questions that are arising from this issue of Berlin. For example, which you must also bear in mind, there are perspectives. If you are very familiar with the writing of George Aite, who belongs to the internalists, as well as the externally led by Walter Rodner. And more then you now talk about the political philosophy of those who take to actually adopt. What is it that even those who were in post-independence, who advocated for nether African socialism among others, they have been truncated up to now among others, so that we do not continue to blame the external problem, external people for our own personal problem here. So that when you feel they work like this, you will be like philosophizing that, look, if we follow this and this, these two perspectives among others, are we in this position because of external factor, or we are in this condition because of our own internal problem? To that extent, maybe we agree that the current challenge we have here is not the man who is Berlin, who is in London, that these are essentially self-imposed situations here, so that we can know how to overcome our challenges in modern state. So if you take this perspective, I think it's going to help us in no small way.
Thank you, sir. So we'll quickly take, because of our time fast spent, we'll take the brief response from the analysts. So please, quickly, we have less than 5 minutes to finish our session.
Wow. Thank you very much.
So you take 2 minutes, we take 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for your beautiful comments and contributions, which I believe will go a long way to solidify my argument and paper. I really appreciate. I will respond generally. My very senior colleague has helped in addressing more issues raised already. The date of 1983, why I chose that was that that was when the Igbo Community Association was established in Zaria because they had consolidated. And then talking about the issue of neighbors killing neighbors, and then why the way how we're able to reintegrate. Actually, it wasn't so. Though my topic is very traumatic because I interview the Hausa community where I see old men shedding tears, crying. Okay, and what they are saying that they have lived peacefully, and those who carry out some of these attacks are not within the community. They are mobs coming from neighboring villages. I also have instances where the houses they hid the Igbo in their houses, okay, to prevent such attacks on them. Right? That's that. And then for my intervention, basically is to correct some misconception, right? Because when people that the Igbo lost their properties, but I'm saying that even Ojuku's property up to date is in Sabongari, of which he willed to his daughter, who he had while he was in Kano. Okay, these are listed many of the houses, properties where Igbos will claim houses. And also we had the variable of NYC. We had Igbos who were posted to Zaria, and they were retained. The likes of Professor Onyemedipe of medicine. Okay, these are renowned professors, and it was through NYC that they got to Zaria and they remained there. So, well, I won't, because of time, let me allow other panelists to. But thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one thing that I should start with is that the focus of this paper is architectural states, previous environments, and I think there are some perspectives. I'm not saying that there's only religion of Islam, it's only in Islam or Muslims that violence or the important service. I'm also not saying that the issue of insurgency is only limited to videos. The paper has a focus and looking at the intersection between violence and violence and how Islam is looking at it and providing solutions. Wonderful. And so I've mentioned, said that it's not only peculiar to Islam, but so many other places now. Here we have violence like insurgency. Other thing I also want to mention is that the ethical dimension of state within a state. Well, we all know that portions of our constitution allows for things. And the issue of Sharia in Nigeria. Someone has mentioned, I think it's my brother here that mentioned that the lady that changed to Christianity was being persecuted. I think you have to be very careful in looking at what the social media is saying and what the real traditional media and the real news is looking at. I think if you go, because of time, I will have made references to newspapers where we have correct versions of what actually happened. Because it's not correct that the lady was persecuted and was then not normal or something. The year 2025, the government has come out to say something like that. And then before that, in 2023, we have the courts that gave the protection to a lady that changed to Christianity, Mary Oloway. It is here. The court in the north gave protection to her. It was her family that was actually trying to harm her, was changed from the region of Islam to. So then the issue of perpetration of violence as associating themselves with Islam. Well, again, anybody can say anything about that this is what I am, but we all know that what the colonial masters have done in terms of violence, in terms of perpetrating evil, and they still continue to do it. It cannot be linked to their religious inclinations or affiliations. Religion is part, individuals are part. And there is no civilization, no culture, no religion that you don't have people of such. Adolf Hitler he has some religious affiliation. And we all know what perpetrated. He even perpetrated. Nobody is saying that it's because of, so you can go on and on and okay.
Thank you, sir. Well, first of all, I would like to thank everyone for the contributions to the panel, and we'll be wrapping up the panel. And the panelists, I thank you. The technical crew, thank you. And I also thank LSA for giving us the opportunity to come and share our ideas and critique it and see how it can be made better. A sentence on the question of Berlin is that my own view is that you cannot rule out the question of identity when you're talking about the development of any society. On that note, I would like to thank you. It's open for discussion. We can meet ourselves on the way or in other panels. Thank you very much and good morning. Have a good day. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dilma. Yeah.